Ladies and gentlemen, we've brought you here today to put before you the case of the vanishing corpse. What happened to Jesus of Nazareth? I'm going to call a number of witnesses to find out what happened. What you will hear today is based on the eyewitness accounts of the first 4 books of the New Testament. Matthew and John were both eyewitness accounts. Mark wrote what he was told by an eyewitness, and Luke did a careful investigation. What are the possibilities? 1. Jesus didn't die. He was unconscious when buried, or they buried someone else. 2. The women went to the wrong tomb. 3. The body was taken or stolen. Or 4. Something else. First, we need to establish whether or not Jesus actually died. Call the Centurion on execution duty that day. Are you the Centurion who was on duty on the Friday of the Passover?
Yes, Your Honour. There were 3 prisoners that day. 2 thieves and a political prisoner.
It's the political prisoner that we are concerned with today. What condition was he in when he was handed over to you?
He'd been whipped with a scourge, so his back was raw.
Okay, let me just stop you there. We have a replica of a scourge here. It would have been made with leather with bone tied into it to inflict as much damage as possible.
He'd also been beaten around his head. It looked as though his beard had been pulled out and a crown of thorns had been shoved down onto his head.
We have another replica here. It would have been something like this. The thorns on the crown were about 3 inches long and it would have been shoved down onto his head.
I've never seen anything like this, but I think it was done because of something that was said about the prisoner being called the King of the Jews. He looked a mess. He was so weak that on his way to the execution site, we had to get another guy to come and carry the crosspiece while he stumbled on ahead.
And how was he crucified?
He was offered the usual wine mixed with myrrh to deaden the pain, but he refused it. He was stripped and stretched out on the crossbeam and then nailed to it through either wrist. The crossbeam was then hauled into position and then a nail was driven through the ankles.
And what time was this?
9 o'clock in the morning. It was then a question of waiting through the hottest part of the day. About midday it suddenly got dark and there was an earthquake. It was eerie. The darkness lasted about 3 hours. And about 3 o'clock the prisoner cried out in a loud voice and died.
Okay. Wasn't it rather early for him to have died? I put it to you, Centurion, that he was merely unconscious, and in your hurry to get the job done, you failed to ensure that the prisoner was in fact dead. The pressure was on because the site needed to be clear before the Jewish Sabbath at sunset.
Listen, I've supervised numerous crucifixions. The objective is the death of the prisoner. It's more than my job's worth to fail. In fact, it's more than my life is worth to fail to kill the prisoner. To ensure a hasty death, we break the prisoner's legs.
But that wasn't done to Jesus, was it?
No, Your Honour, because he was already dead. But to make absolutely sure, one of the guards thrust the spear into his side and the water and blood that flowed out showed that he was dead.
And you are absolutely sure? No minute doubt?
I'm 100% certain. In fact, Governor Pilate asked me the same question when he sent for me to report to him. Your Honour, may I add something?
Go on.
This prisoner was like no other I've ever dealt with. They usually curse and struggle, but he didn't. In fact, he called out to God, asking him to forgive, for God to forgive us for what we were doing. Some of the religious leaders who were there, they mocked him and they told him to come down from the cross if he really was the Son of God. And later he asked someone to take care of his mother. He was in agony, and yet he thought about others. What a man. What a man. I can't help thinking, was this all some dreadful mistake? I mean, he really was a special person. I wonder.
Thank you, Centurion.
Oh, Your Honour, there was one more thing.
Yes?
Well, as you know, bodies of those who were crucified are thrown out on the town dump with the rest of the rubbish. But Mr. Arimathea, a prominent citizen of Jerusalem, he asked the governor's permission to bury him. Governor Pilate told me.
Thank you, Centurion. You may step down. Call Governor Pilate. You are Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea,
I am.
and I understand that you ordered the crucifixion for Jesus of Nazareth.
I handed him over. I tried to release him, but he didn't speak it up for himself. If I didn't know any better, I'd say he wanted to die. But that doesn't make sense, does it? My wife warned me to leave this case alone. Have nothing to do with this man, she said. I just can't stop thinking about him.
Your Excellency,
Oh, yes, sorry.
you gave permission for the prisoner to be buried.
Yes, a local merchant came and asked permission. Well, I was surprised that he was dead so soon, so I sent for the Centurion in charge, wanting to make sure that this Jesus was actually dead. I couldn't have him claiming a miscarriage of justice, or for that matter, run the risk of having some of the religious leaders on my back with their threats of writing to Caesar. The officer confirmed his death, and so I gave permission for the burial to go ahead. I did try to release him.
Your Excellency, you granted permission and then...
Oh yes, I gave permission for the burial. Later a delegation of priests arrived, demanding a guard to watch over the tomb.
Why sit a guard over a dead body?
Why indeed? They had remembered something the prisoner had said about dying and rising from the dead on the third day. I ask you. Well, they were worried that his followers would steal the body and claim that he had risen. I find these Jews difficult to govern, so to keep them happy, I sent a guard with orders to make the tomb as secure as possible. Anything for a quiet life.
Indeed. So I understand it, the tomb was sealed and a guard was left to watch.
That's right. I couldn't do any more. He was dead and buried.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You may step down.
Oh, I couldn't find anything wrong with him. She warned me to have nothing to do with this man.
As a member of the Jewish priestly order, the next witness cannot be interviewed in a Gentile court. To do so would make him ritually unclean and unable to do his job in the temple. So, we're going to have a live link with him in his study. Rabbi Shimon, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Good. Rabbi, I understand you work with Caiaphas, the high priest?
That is correct, Your Honour.
And I understand from my inquiries that you were part of the delegation that went to Governor Pilate?
Yes, Your Honour. You see, we remembered something this Jesus claimed before he died. Quite impossible, of course. He said he would in fact die, and then 3 days later come back to life. Wishful thinking. But we thought his motley band of followers might steal the body and claim he had come back to life. We wanted to ensure against such claims, and so asked the governor himself for a bodyguard. Roman soldiers, as we all know, are the best there are, and so the best deterrent. We also had the large stone covering the entrance sealed with the temple seal, making it all official.
You certainly went through a lot of trouble. So what happened?
Well, the soldiers stood guard, and at some point they must have fallen asleep. While they were so occupied, the followers of the dead man stole the body.
So you expect me and these good people listening to believe that the soldiers realised who had stolen the body while they were asleep?
Well, someone must have stolen the body, because the tomb was empty and certainly none of us would have touched the corpse. No, we haven't got the body. I wish we had. Then we could show it and prove he was still dead. No, his followers must have taken it. What other explanation is there?
Thank you, Rabbi Shimon. You may step down. Call Private Marcus. You are Private Marcus of the Imperial Roman Army,
Yes, Your Honour.
and you were part of the guard that was assigned to guard the tomb of the prisoner, Jesus of Nazareth.
Yes, Your Honour.
Tell the court what happened on your watch.
We kept watch over the tomb, and then in the early hours of the morning we fell asleep. While we were sleeping, the followers of the prisoner came and stole the body away, Your Honour.
And do you usually sleep with your eyes open?
Your Honour?
Well, come now. How do you know it was Jesus' followers that stole the body if you were all asleep?
Well, it must have been them. I mean, the body was gone.
And does the governor know that you fell asleep whilst on duty?
Yes. No.
Come on, he either does or he doesn't.
Yes, Your Honour, he does.
But the penalty for falling asleep on duty is a flogging and a dismissal at the very least, if not, execution. And yet, here you are, still alive, in the army.
Well, Your Honour, Pilate was told.
Speak up, man, we can't hear you.
Pilate was told, Your Honour.
I don't understand.
This is off the record.
Yes?
We were told to say that we fell asleep.
Who by?
Some of the priests.
But why?
They were worried how it would look if we told the truth.
Okay, so what actually happened that morning?
We were ordered to guard the tomb which contained the body of Jesus. Just before dawn, we heard some women coming along the path where there was an earthquake, and well, Your Honour, have you seen a heavenly being?
A what?
An angel, Your Honour. Well, that's what we saw, a great man in shining robes. He came and rolled that stone away from the entrance of the tomb, without any effort at all. Then he sat down on it. This angel being was awesome. My mates and I were scared stiff, and we've seen some pretty hairy things in our time, but nothing like this. We couldn't move. We could only stare.
And what about the women? Did they see this angel?
Sure, and we knew they were scared because the angel told them not to be afraid. He said he knew they were looking for Jesus, but that he was not there, but had come back to life. Well, you can just imagine the shock. I mean, we were supposed to be guarding a corpse, and this angel said he had come back to life again.
So what did you do?
Well, after the initial shock, we all ran away. You couldn't see us for dust. Some of us went to the temple to report to the priests, whilst the rest of the men went back to barracks. We told the priests everything, and they were shocked, I can tell you. They made us wait outside where they called an emergency meeting. They called us back and told us to spread the story that we'd fallen asleep, and that his followers had stolen the body while we were sleeping. But we're not that stupid. Even when they gave us a large sum of money, we weren't keen. So I spoke up for all of us when I asked if they would see us right by Pilate. I mean, we wanted to live to enjoy the money. They agreed to inform Pilate of their plan, and we agreed to spread the story of the tomb robbers.
And anything more to add?
No, Your Honour, though I'd love to know if he really is alive.
Thank you, Private Marcus. You may step down. Call Mary of Magdala to the stand. You are Mary of Magdala,
I am.
and you knew the man, Jesus of Nazareth?
Yes, I know him.
Could you please tell us what happened on the first day of that week?
We were all stunned, shattered and frightened, because our teacher and master Jesus is dead. I couldn't sleep. Mary, Joanna and I decided to pay our last respects to the master. You see, he'd been buried in a hurry, so we weren't able to anoint his body.
So are you very sure it was Jesus who died on the cross? I've heard it said it was someone who was made to look like Jesus.
Yes, I have heard that too. The group of people who said that they don't even agree with themselves. Some say Jesus chose a disciple to replace him. Some say it was his enemy. Some even say it was Simon of Cyrene, the man who carried Jesus' cross to the place of execution. Simon is Alexander and Rufus's dad. Ask them. He's not dead. I stood by the cross and watched my master die.
Oh, Mary, it must have come as a great shock, very distressing. All your hopes dashed. So it's possible that the tomb you saw was the wrong one that hadn't been used and therefore was lying open.
Oh no, Your Honour, we were watching when they buried him on that awful Friday. We wanted to return and embalm his poor broken body, but we had a problem.
Yes?
Who was going to move the stone that was blocking the entrance? But we needn't have worried because there was an earthquake and the stone had been rolled back. We peered inside and realised with a shock that the body had disappeared.
Vanished?
That was the peculiar thing. His grave clothes were in the same place. It was as if he'd slipped through them, although the headcloth was neatly folded up and lying in a different spot. As you can imagine, we were shocked. So we ran back into the city to tell Peter and John. They didn't believe us. Typical men assumed we were overwrought and hysterical. So they decided to look for themselves, and I followed them.
So that's it? The tomb was empty?
Oh no, Your Honour, by the time I arrived for the second time, Peter and John had left. I was exhausted and too upset. Where was the body? I was convinced someone had taken the body. Anyway, I decided to look inside again, and well, do you believe in angels?
Go on.
Well, there inside the tomb sat two angels. They asked me why I was crying, so I told them. I turned round and saw someone and thought it was the gardener. He asked me why I was crying, so I explained once more and asked if he knew anything about the body and who had taken it. Imagine my surprise when he called me by name and, well, then I knew.
Knew what exactly?
Well, it's Jesus, of course.
Mary, given the traumatic event you've witnessed, surely you were hallucinating. You know, just seeing what you want to see.
Oh, come, Your Honour. I wasn't looking for Jesus. I was looking for his corpse. Why would I suddenly imagine him alive? Isn't it wonderful, Your Honour, he is alive?
Yes, well, thank you, Mary. You may step down. Call Peter, the fisherman from Galilee. You are Peter, previously known as Simon Bar-Jonah, and former disciple of Jesus.
I am Peter, and I am a disciple of Jesus.
I put it to you, Peter, that you've made all this up. You and this bunch of followers, you're trying to convince everyone, and yourselves, that he really did come back to life. Peter, I will have you for contempt of court.
I'm sorry, Your Honour, but if we were making this up, do you really think we would have chosen a bunch of women as the first to see Jesus? The first witnesses of Christ's resurrection? People these days don't reckon much on a woman's say-so.
True. So what did happen that morning?
Well, we'd had an awful time. Our leader and our teacher was dead. And for all my bragging, I denied him. When it came to the crunch, I was scared to be associated with him. Crucifixion is a terrible way to die. I felt rotten, and I had done all weekend. Then a bunch of hysterical women came and wake us up with tales of earthquakes and missing bodies. John and I eventually realised that they were telling us that Jesus' tomb was empty, so we went to look for ourselves. John got to the tomb before me, and he was peering in, and I rushed in, and sure enough, the tomb was empty. Well, not quite.
Oh?
The burial clothes had been left behind. Now, why would anyone steal a corpse and unwrap the body before taking it, particularly one that was so battered? Who would want to steal it? We went back to the home we'd been staying in, and we were still puzzling over the mystery when Mary came in, bursting full of excitement, saying she'd seen the Lord. We thought she'd finally cracked. The last 48 hours had put us all under a tremendous strain.
Well, that is certainly understandable.
Later that day, Cleopas came banging on the door telling us that he'd seen the Lord. We still weren't convinced. We put it down to the heat of the day and thought that the trauma of the past few days had finally taken its toll. By this time, all of us had gathered together, except Thomas. We locked ourselves in the place we were staying.
That sounds a bit dramatic. Why did you do that?
Well, we were worried about the authorities and that they would come after us because we were known as Jesus' disciples. We'd been seen with him for 3 years. Suddenly, Jesus was there in the room with us. His first words to us were, "Peace be with you." We were terrified, thinking that we were seeing a ghost. But then he encouraged us to touch him and to see for ourselves that he was flesh and blood. He even asked us for something to eat. So Mary and Cleopas weren't deluded. Jesus is alive.
Peter, are you sure you weren't all hallucinating?
With all due respect, Your Honour, I wasn't drunk or ill, and other people saw Jesus too. People don't exactly have the same hallucinations.
That is a good point.
You see, we were all so devastated over Jesus' death that we didn't believe. I mean, who ever heard of someone who'd been crucified coming back to life? For us, the empty tomb meant that someone had taken the Lord's body. So we didn't believe Mary or Cleopas when they told us that they had not only seen the Lord, but they had also spoken with him. But now we have seen and spoken with him ourselves. Jesus died, and now he is alive. Isn't that amazing?
Yes. Well, thank you, Peter. You may step down now. Call Thomas Didimus. You are Thomas Didimus, a former follower of Jesus of Nazareth?
I am Thomas Didimus, and I follow Jesus.
And you are, by reputation, a skeptic, I believe.
Well, if you mean I'm not gullible, then yes. I like to see things with my own eyes and investigate things for myself.
So what happened the Sunday of Passover?
Well, we were all scared stiff. Our leader, the one we thought was the Messiah, God's promised one, had been publicly executed. In fact, he was betrayed by one of us.
And that's Judas of Iscariot?
Yes, I still can't believe that he would sell the Lord for 30 pieces of silver, though I hear he tried to make amends, telling the priests that he'd made a terrible mistake. Anyway, we were all worried that as close friends of Jesus, we would be the next to be arrested. So we met in secret behind locked doors. By Sunday, I'd had enough and decided to find out what was happening. When I eventually got back, that night, the others were full of excitement. I couldn't understand it. They were like a completely different bunch to the ones that I'd left. They explained that they'd seen Jesus, that he'd been with them. It was then that I realized the full extent of the enormous strain that we'd all been under. All this meeting behind locked doors, watching our backs, jumping at any sound, they'd all lost it.
Well, quite.
I told them all there and then that I wouldn't believe unless I could actually put my finger into the nail prints. Not me, no visions for me, flesh and blood, hard proof.
So you are still a doubter then, thinking the rest are deluded?
Oh no, Your Honor. I'm certain that Jesus rose from the dead. You see, he came again a week later. We were all together this time and he simply appeared right there and turned to me and told me to put my fingers into his wounds. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe it at first. It just isn't natural, but it was true. He was there, living proof that death had been conquered. I was ashamed, and I fell down at his feet because I really finally realized who he was.
You mean you realised it was Jesus?
Well, yes, but more than that. He really is the promised one. In fact, he is the Son of God. Jesus then told us there would be many more who would believe in him, even though they hadn't seen him. So you see, Your Honor, I'm no longer a skeptic. I'm a believer.
So you're really convinced Jesus is alive?
Oh yes, I would die defending it. In fact, most of us disciples did.
Thank you, Thomas. You may step down. So ladies and gentlemen, it's over to you. What do you think happened to Jesus of Nazareth?